But I don't like this. Other than that, we wait for the next. And he worked with Kingsbury? Oh, I remember.
Are we calling them back? Are they on their way back? Okay. Oh, yeah.
So far, so good.
Oh, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me online? We have a new mic system, so we don't have to pass the mic anymore. Wow, this is like the old days. You'd be sitting and then you'd be surprised how noisy a group of meditators can be. Ring the bell, like it explodes into wonderful, wonderful conversations with each other. So, I want to talk about Mountain and River Sutra this morning by Dogen Zenji. Every time I read something by Dogen, I say, this is my favorite thing by Dogen. We had a wonderful talk by Shishin Galula last Sunday about the 5 remembrances, which are really important preliminary practices for this kind of a spiritual path, because they remind us about impermanence, which is how the world is, right? Everything is changing, we're changing, and we're all going to get older, we're all going to get sick, and we're all going to die. And that's a basic teaching of Buddhism, and an important one, because if we don't acknowledge death and our fear of it, then we spend a lot of time doing other things to avoid that fear, and life becomes more dysfunctional. So, what is it that causes, why do we suffer? I mean, there's all kinds of reasons, but what is this fear we have of public speaking, the self-consciousness we have, the fear we have of making mistakes, of looking bad, of not measuring up? We all know what this experience is. We all live as part of our humanity, as part of being a human being. And it's really a delusion in the sense that we perceive there is an audience watching us, and there is no audience. And this self that we construct is the root cause of our suffering, because it is essentially built on fear. This self-consciousness, this fear, this me. And the teaching of our tradition invites us to realize that we are much larger than who we think we are. and what I'd like to talk about this morning, and it's what Dogen is talking about. So, let me read the first paragraph, and really, usually Dogen says the most important things in the first couple of sentences of a long writing. So we won't get all the way through, we won't get very far through the sutra. We don't really need to. We can just read the first couple of paragraphs and there'll be more than enough to digest and chew on there, because it's Dogen. I have put up I know of 3 translations. This translation I'm using is by Kaz Tanahashi. There's another one, I think, by Okamura Roshi, and there's one by the Translation Project, right? Yeah. Mountains and waters right now actualize the ancient Buddha way. Mountains and waters right now actualize the ancient Buddha way, each abiding in its phenomenal expression realizes completeness. Each abiding in its form is expressing and realizing completeness, wholeness. Because mountains and waters have been active since before the empty eon, and how long is that empty eon? What kind of time are we talking about here? Can we measure that? You want to get a tape measure out and see how long that is, or can we measure it on a clock? Because mountains and waters have been active since before the empty eon, they are alive at this moment. Because they have been the self since before form arose, they are emancipation realization. Because they have been you and me since before we were born, they are freedom. They are liberation. They are fully liberating right here, right now, not somewhere else. Where are the mountains and rivers? We live in the Midwest. It's flat as a pancake. Where are the mountains and rivers? Where are they? So this is called a sutra, but technically it's not really usually a sutra would be one of the suttas, the words of the Buddha would be considered to be a sutra. But in the development of Mahayana Buddhism, the notion of Buddha becomes much larger and cosmic, so that there is a sense that we're all Buddha, we're all intrinsically Buddha, we're all intrinsically awake, and there are many Buddhas here helping us along. And so, and in a way, I think really Dogen is saying the mountains and rivers are the sutra. The phenomenal world is the sutra. Right here. Where's the phenomenal world? When you just look around, what are you seeing right now? You're seeing yourself. There is no audience here. So it's likely that when Dogen wrote this, he might have had a poem in mind that was written by Sudong Bo, who was a 12th century Buddhist monk. And he wrote, it was very well known in China, and the poem goes as follows. The stream with its sounds is his long, broad tongue. The looming mountain, his wide awake body. Throughout the night, song after song, how can I speak at dawn? So who are we? This is the most basic question we have all been asking ourselves since we were born. Who am I? What am I doing here? Why am I here? What's the meaning of life? Is there a meaning of life? Do I have agency in this world? Who am I? And, you know, Dogen is saying very clearly, you are mountains and rivers. We are this wholeness which cannot be divided, and it is always here, it has always been here, it was here before we were born, it is here after we die, and since we are really this, which is beyond words, our authentic self is unborn. Our authentic self doesn't have a birth date, but Julie had a birthday yesterday. And we celebrate Julie's birthday because Julie's here. We celebrate our birthdays, so we also die, don't we? We will. We will lose all of the ones we love. It's hard to hold both of these together, what is your true face before your parents were born? You know, you try to think about that and that's a pickle. Pickles are good. Pickles are koans. Life is a pickle. and it matters how you work with a pickle. We both die and we don't die. Both things are true, and it's hard to hold the largeness of who we are. Life is complex. Life comes as a whole. And the problem is that we don't really live in our life. We pull ourselves out of it and think that we can be a part and objectify something and understand this. But when we do this, we reduce ourselves down to something that is much smaller than who we actually are. We are all complex. We are all whole. You can't attain this. You can't lose it. It's already here. Dogen is saying, just look around. You're already awake. You are the Buddha. And you can't figure this out with language. It's already here. And if you sit down, as we do in our practice, and you sit still long enough, you will see that it's always been here. And you don't have to go looking for it anymore. It's not an it. How many of you saw the film we showed of Red Pine? What was the name of it? The Day of the Dead? Dancing with the Dead? It was a wonderful film about Red Pine. He's a wonderful translator of Chinese poems and has written commentaries on the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra. And he was a real character, right?
Yeah.
And he said something at the end of the film. Someone asked him, Zen, what is it? And he said, why does there have to be an it? You see, it's so hard for us to open to the wholeness of our life, which is always here, and we pull something out. We decontextualize. We reduce ourselves down to something that isn't less complex, so we can understand it, we can name it, we can manipulate it, we can control it. And this, whatever this is, cannot be controlled, manipulated. It can be appreciated. And what's really important to get is this is also Julie's birthday. Both are true. So, you know, you have to love somebody. You have to love somebody. Love is not abstract. Love's personal. Love hurts. So, well, here's another poem about going into the mountains. So what Red Pine was talking about is very interesting. You know, there's a long tradition of hermits in China. A lot of them were Taoists, Buddhists too. You know, Buddhists, Zen, Taoist people were fond of going into the mountains, and there's a poem that expresses why they might have been fond of it here by Teisho. It says, "Not stopping to mark the trail, let me push even deeper into the mountains. Perhaps there's a place where bad news can never reach me." Yes! Let's go there. Yeah. And the thing that Red Pine said, which was really touching, he said, you know, these hermits would go and live in the mountains, and you know, they were really considered sages, and every so often they'd come down to the village, and people, you know, appreciated that because they had some wisdom, and they had some wisdom that they had, it wasn't secondhand, and people appreciated that, and they could come into the village and help people clarify things, and then they'd disappear for another 10 years, and then they'd come back. So we live in a culture that is creating a lot of conflict and a lot of problems, and it's disorienting. Things are changing very rapidly. And you know, if you think of the phenomenal world, the way that artists represent landscapes in our Western culture is, you know, you see a beautiful view of the mountains, and it's sort of like you're looking through a window at it. It's out there, right? And you're here. It could be beautiful. And then if you look at a Chinese landscape, you feel the difference? I wish I had one to show you. We could look at it, but if you go look at the Chinese landscape, you'll feel like you're in it. You're not. You're not removed, you're a part of the landscape. It's a very different perspective. Yeah. So the way that we reduce, the reductionist way we have of making the whole smaller and pulling out a part from the whole context and trying to understand it, control it, define it, that is actually creating a lot of problems. A lot of problems. Let me give you an example. I talked about this to some of you. I think you may know the experiment. They did a experiment which became the basis for how they sort of understood addiction for a long time. They took a mouse and put it in a cage with 2 bottles of water. One was clean water and one was water with something like cocaine in it. And the mouse ran around and drank the water, and then it drank the cocaine water, and it kept drinking the cocaine water and dropped over dead. I said, oh, this is addiction. The mouse has an addictive personality, whatever. And that became the way we looked at addiction for a while, until some bright person realized, hey, maybe mice don't like to be alone. Maybe the mouse, so maybe we should try this another way. We kind of remove the mouse from its living habitat and put it in a laboratory, which is what science does. It's good in a lot of ways, but also it's important to understand we've taken that mouse out of its living context. So they tried another one. They put a lot of mouse in a cage with things they could run on and spirals, and they could play, and they had the same 2 waters in the cage. And the mouse drank the regular water, and of course they went and sucked on the cocaine. Who wouldn't? Yeah. But then they went back and drank the regular water and stopped drinking the water with the cocaine. Wow. That's a different result, isn't it? What can we deduce from that experiment? Well, mice are healthier when they're together, when they're in a community, when they're playing together, when they're having conversations. And maybe the lesson is that when we are alone, when we are lonely, we're actually much more vulnerable and susceptible to addiction, right? We have an opioid crisis in our country. Why? We're the loneliest country in the world. I mean, the statistics are shocking. So perhaps one thing we could conclude is that when we are isolated and lonely, not only are we're not as happy, we're not well, we're more vulnerable to addiction. Yeah. Does that make sense? So here's another example. We do this in all kinds of ways. We like to name things. I'm an avid bird watcher, so I name birds and identify them, but it's interesting that when our founding, and we do this, I'm reading this book that Adrian showed me about how indigenous people think about birds. It's lovely. And we have a way of thinking about making birds or animals symbols of some trait, some human quality that we identify with them, so they become a symbol of that. Like lions are, the king of the lions are brave, and blue jays are talkative and a little obnoxious. And when our founding fathers made this country, the symbol that they had, that they made, that they came up with was the eagle. And they projected qualities onto the eagle, that it was strong because it had good vision and it was a good hunter, right? It could catch fish and animals. So it was, now that's an interesting projection onto an eagle. And Native Americans have a very different perspective on hawks and eagles, because they live in nature and they actually see hawks and eagles. And I'm sure if you've been in nature any length of time, you've probably seen a red-tailed hawk soaring around with crows, like, dive bombing on the poor thing. Have you seen that? Or I've seen blackbirds chasing red-tailed hawks. Starlings, the hawk gets too close to the nest, the blackbirds are going to come out and dive bomb on that red-tailed hawk. And the reason Native Americans respect eagles and hawks is because the hawks and eagles restrain themselves from hurting the birds that are bothering them. Because that eagle or that hawk, with its talons, could just turn and decimate a crow with one swipe, but it doesn't. It restrains itself. It has power, and it uses its power with restraint. It uses its power to live, to hunt, to catch something it wants to eat, but it does not use its power to hurt these birds that are irritating it. It just flies around. That's a very different view of eagles and hawks. And we do this in all kinds of ways. So, let me get back to the sutra a little bit. Mountains do not lack the qualities of mountains, therefore they always abide in ease and always walk. You should examine in detail this quality of the mountains walking. Mountains walking? There's a pickle. You're trying to figure out how mountains walk. What's he saying? Is it a metaphor? What's going on here? Mountains walking is just like human walking. Accordingly, do not doubt mountains walking, even though it does not look the same as human walking. The Buddha ancestors' words point to walking. This is fundamental understanding. You should penetrate these words. Because green mountains walk, they are permanent. Although they walk more swiftly than the wind, someone in the mountains does not realize or understand it. In the mountains means the blossoming of the entire world. In the mountains. In your life is the blossoming of the entire world. And yet we pull ourselves out. We pull ourselves out. All these teachings are about emptiness. If you know anything about Buddhism, you know this is all about something shunyata. Has many names, beyond words, vastness, different translations of emptiness, trying to point at what reality actually is. This reality is everything that's in this room right now, the context and the context we see and the context we don't see. And it's all here live, going on. And we can't see it all. We absolutely can't see it all. But if you sit still long enough, you start to open to this, what is here. And don't remove yourself from this. Another word I really like for emptiness is suchness. It has this sense of intimacy, that when we are open-hearted and here, we are intimate. We show up. There's often it's said that this is like, it's like hearing with your eyes. It's like seeing with your ears. In the mountains means the blossoming of the entire light, of the entire world. People outside the mountains do not realize or understand the mountains walking. Those without eyes to see mountains cannot realize, understand, see, or hear this as it is. If you doubt mountains walking, you do not know your own walking. It is not that you do not walk, but that you do not know or understand your own walking. Since you do not know your own walking, you should fully know the green mountains walking. There's a passage here that I'm missing. Oh, okay. So in China, the word for Zen is Chan, and we associate Zen with meditation because it's derived from the Pali word dhyana, which means meditation. But actually, the Chinese, when they read that word dhyana, they didn't have any word that quite matched that meaning, and so it was a transliteration. They actually used a character that sounded like that. And so the actual translation of Chan is not meditation. It's more like to sacrifice, almost like to bow down to the mountains, to honor the mountains and rivers, to acknowledge, to abdicate, to let go. To have the courage to let go into this, what's here, without trying to manipulate it, without trying to win, without trying to be right. Chinese didn't think of meditation like we do today. They weren't meditating for well-being or psychological health. They weren't doing any of that stuff. They didn't think of meditation as improving their lives. For them, sitting meditation was just to express the spiritual truth of their true nature. Take the seat and be Buddha. Take your one seat. Take this posture. You be Buddha. Just be mountains and rivers. Be prairies and grassland. Be lakes. Be the Great Lake. But if we don't sit, it's hard to realize who we are in this way. And we will, because we are creatures of habit, we will start thinking quite a lot. And I know I do this when I don't sit. I think too much. I get stuck trying to figure something out, some system, some way of doing this or that. And if you sit, you start to come home to this embodied awareness, and you begin to see that your true nature has always been here, and it's the most important thing to be fulfilled as a human being. So if we don't sit, we're gonna spread chaos and suffering around like butter. So we have to sit so we can take care of the insanity and the suffering in ourselves so that we don't spread it around. We don't sit, we're gonna create more suffering for others around us. That's what we do. So the last part of this sutra that I want to read is the most important part, I think, and it really gets to what Dogen is trying to say. Priest Dokai of Mount Fulong said to the assembly, "The Green Mountains are always walking. A stone woman gives birth to a child at night." Another pickle. A stone woman gives birth to a child at night. Green mountains are always walking. We think mountains are solid. They are not. We think we are solid. We are not. I think this chair is solid. I hope it is. At least for the time that I'm sitting on it. But the stone woman gives birth to a child at night. What a mysterious thing to say. What could he be saying? When you reach this kind of pickle in your life, and it happens all the time, you can either go down a rabbit hole and find all kinds of conspiracy theories there and watch a lot of news and get really worked up, or you can go through the Dharma gate and open your heart and find your footing and find who you are, and then live this vow, this bodhisattva vow. Bring it into your heart and open your broken heart and live this vow and orient your life by this beautiful, just amazing bodhisattva vow to save, to heal suffering wherever it arises, in the human heart, in the world, in mountains and rivers, in the biosphere, wherever. So, how do we trust what moves in the dark? To open to the wholeness of life, to be in life this way, is to already, it's very clear, we don't know all of this. We can't. And though we do have a birth date, and we will die, we also are unborn, and both are true. And if you don't see your true nature, your unborn nature, then this life in the relative world will be much more painful and confusing and not very satisfying. Because we are unborn, we can have the courage and the resilience to fall on our face and get up again and do it again. Fall over, get up, fall over, get up. We can have the resilience to show up, even when things are impossible, seemingly impossible. All kinds of stories of bodhisattvas doing impossible things. The one I really like is a bodhisattva that tries to fill up a well with snow, and he walks like 5 miles with a little spoon of snow. Get snow. Mountains are always walking. The green mountains are always walking. And the stone woman gives birth to a child at night. Can we trust what moves in the dark? Any thoughts, questions, comments? Yeah,
I
Chris?
have a comment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I think I got about 5%.
Me too.
But it was, I really appreciated it. The comment comes, when you were talking about Red Pine and the movie we watched.
Yeah.
It really became clear to me that there's something noble about those of us sort of living in this world trying to do this.
Yeah.
I can really appreciate that when you go into a mountain, that has its own challenges,
Mm-hmm.
but there isn't quite the distraction that we live with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
You're somehow really able to appreciate the mountains and rivers, and any of us who've been in nature know how it shifts your state of being.
Yeah.
So I have an appreciation for my own efforts.
Yeah, lovely. Yes, but first of all, there's the awareness that people have been doing this for a long time, this practice that we're doing here in Oak Park and that you're doing wherever you are online. And people have been doing this for thousands of years. And it's the same kind of practice in different countries, different languages, different cultures, different ways of seeing the world, but the same kind of practice. Yeah. So even though we can't be in the mountains here, we can be in the mountains on our cushion. You can sit like Shikantaza, sit like a mountain, be the mountain, be your life, be whole. You don't have to be whole, you are whole. Just open to what's already here. It's in a way, it's the most obvious thing, and yet it's so difficult to trust this, because we can't verbalize it in the way that we can name things. Yeah. Yeah, Paige?
I just wonder if I could add something.
Can you speak up a little
Oh,
louder
yeah.
so
I
we
just
can
need
all
to
hear?
add a little something that I guess it's quite personal, but
Yeah.
My family and I moved from Oahu in August.
Oh.
We lived in the Green Mountains of Manoa.
Oh yeah.
And we greeted when my children were babies, we would go out every night. We would say goodnight to the mountains. We would greet the mountains in the morning.
Yeah.
So we had been in multiple levels asking ourselves, where are the mountains?
Yeah.
But it did strike me as something I never found with my youngest one when he was like 20 months old. He looked up at the skyscrapers and he said, mountain. And so that's just what I had been thinking about.
Yes, June and I lived on the Big Island for 15 years, right on the base of Mauna Kea, and we saw the whole view of Mauna Kea every day, and we were very lucky and it had many faces and many Mauna Kea walking. Yeah, it was beautiful. And when we moved here and when we had my mountain seat ceremony, part of the ritual is to name the temple by a mountain that's close by. We were in a bit of a pickle. What do we call it? The Sears Tower Temple. I think you forgot what name we called our temple. I think it was the Eagle Mountain, or we found a mountain up on the border of Canada. That was like the closest. We were up there and we saw a mountain. I think it's Eagle Mountain. It sounded good, so we never used the name, but it was a little bit of a pickle finding them, because the tradition is the temples get named after the mountain they're on or the mountain they're near.
I have a sort of parallel personal experience, much different, but parallel. I had been studying this Sutra, or this classical really, and I was driving. I was actually visiting some people in Vermont, and I turned the corner. And you all know that Vermont's got the Green Mountains.
Yeah.
And I turned the corner, and I saw this, and I thought, oh my God, the mountains are moving. So, it was an awakening. It was a marvelous awakening. But the other thing is that Dogen does this, I think. He said he shifts from blue mountains to green mountains. He says, suddenly he's talking about water, and he talks about water and fire, stone women. He makes us wake up.
Yeah.
And I love that, stuff we don't understand.
Yeah.
Of course we don't understand it.
Yeah.
Because we're in the conceptual. We gotta let go of it. I love how you approach that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's funny, when Shisha was talking about Vermont and the mountains, I went to college at the base of the Green Mountains of the Berkshires. And to me, they were mountains. But one of my good buddies, Cam Burns, from Big Timber, Montana, from a long line of ranchers who went east to college, was being driven up, and the head of admissions was saying, Cam, you love the mountains? He goes, oh no, I haven't seen the mountains. He goes, and Cam's telling me the story, this Montana. I go, oh, I'd love to see the mountains. No, the mountains, don't you love them? He goes, well, I'm sorry, I missed them. And the director of admissions goes, no, we're in them right now. And Cam goes, oh, these are nice hills. So we just can't see the mountains here in Illinois.
Yeah. I used to ride my bike, and there's one place in Oak Park that goes uphill a little bit. It was very thrilling to go downhill for about a block. Yeah, Adrian.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's the Continental Divide on Bridgeland Avenue. Just so you know. Anyway, I wanted to thank you so much because I've been puzzling over this sutra for 30 years.
Wow.
But I never heard anyone discuss it before. And I'm so happy about that. And I've had, like other people, I've had parallel. Now, I spent my entire life in Chicago, so for mountains, I haven't moved much, except when I lived in Minnesota. But I greet the Des Plaines River every time I cross it. And I say, Des Plaines, greetings. And I say, I'm vowing, I've done this for 25 years, I'm vowing to help you every time I cross that river. And now I'm taking care of some land, looks like on the banks of the river.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, until I learned to think of a river not as an object, but not only as a system, but as an entity that includes the water, the rocks, the fish, the turtles, the birds, the plants, the fungi, all of the unimaginable complexity of what it is to be a river flowing through the landscape.
Yes.
And it wasn't until I understood that, and this is my true story, that I started to understand, but not intellectually, what that piece of land, and the other piece of land they help with at Thatcher, wants what kind of relation should we be in with it?
Yeah.
And so, and maybe it was this 30-year puzzlement about token that helped me come to that, but, so thank you.
Yeah, you have to be willing to listen and be with the land and the animals and the birds. And we have such a mechanical way of looking at nature. It's so severe. And just plants, since I'm talking to you, I think of plants right away. I'm reading this book, I forget the title of it.
Eaters of Light.
Huh?
Tell me about it, Eaters of Light.
Eaters of Light.
Yeah.
Wonderful book on botany and plants. And you know how for the longest time, we've thought of plants as passive. And they don't have any intelligence because they don't have brains like animals do. But actually, and there was a big debate about this in botany for a long time. And there was a guy at University of Washington, and there were trees at the university that started dying because caterpillars were eating the leaves. And this went on for several years until at some point the caterpillars died. And he was studying the trees and taking, measuring the chemicals that the leaves put out and stuff. And he discovered that the caterpillars died because the trees started producing some kind of tannin or something that was toxic to the caterpillars. And they died because the leaves, it took the trees a while to do this, so the immune system of trees is slower than ours. It took them a couple, but they did respond to the caterpillars. And what was even more amazing, because there's some sense now that trees and plants communicate by roots, right? But there were trees much further away that were producing the same toxic chemicals in them that had no possible way that they could have communicated with the trees that were being eaten by the caterpillars. And they had to be communicating in some way, but he didn't know how. And that's another pickle.
There's one species of tomato, actually, when the caterpillar starts eating it, they secrete something so the caterpillars stop eating the tomato plant and they start eating each other.
Yeah,
Is that amazing?
yeah, plants have had to be really clever and adapted because they don't move like we animals do. They get stuck in one place. So that seed has to be really careful before it puts out the first root, because once it puts down that root, it's made a commitment. It's no more options. You're going to be there. There better be some water and nutrients there, or else it's going to die. So, I mean, it's just amazing the way the nature works. It's just absolutely incredible. Trees adapt. They respond. There's a tree that, when it's eaten by caterpillars, will produce some other chemical that attracts wasps that eat the caterpillars. Hell, they know how to do that. Come on. Yeah.
For me, in Oak Park or Illinois, or our flatland here, our mountain is the lake.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, the lake is big. We drove around it it took us a couple of days. I've never been around the whole lake, but it is magnificent. Yeah. Yeah, we're lucky to have the lake. It influences everything here. Gary.
There's a book I read a few years ago, and its title is Water Always Wins. And the author is from British Columbia and San Francisco. Two old homes. She traveled the world for some number of years, sort of reporting, chronicling how humans for millennia have tried to control water.
Yes.
But eventually,
the water wins.
The dam is going to break.
Yeah.
The levee in the Mississippi River in New Orleans is going to be reached, and yet we still continue to try to control it.
Yeah. Life is going to win. Yeah. Yeah, Michael?
I really appreciate everything you've said. I want to thank you for that. But in particular, to not present or try to explain any of that as metaphors or analogies. One thing means another. But just to leave it as a pickle.
It's very tempting to want to make it into a metaphor. I'm used to doing that. So to just say, I don't know, it's a pickle. I think pickles are really good. Koans are pickles. And how we learn to be with a pickle, I think, is part of what practice is about. You can match the pickle, which is a kind of reductive way of trying to fix it or solve the problem, or you can meet the pickle. I'll give you an example of one of the koans of Tori Roshi that, I don't do it with my students, but the koan is, how do you stop the fighting across the river? That's a pickle. And if you try to match that with some kind of conflict resolution or something, no, it's not going to work. How do you meet that pickle? That's scary. Anyway, yeah. Don't we have a wonderful tradition though? I mean, Zen, the koans, unbelievable. Just the way of, or reading something by Dogen and being able to digest it and be with it in a way that's reflective and not reduce it down to something like a metaphor and remain open to the mystery of the words. Like, oh, I can't figure that out. It's okay. Yeah, Aiken Roshi says, I forget exactly how he says it, our job is not to solve the mystery, it's to, be the mystery, open to the mystery, Don't try to figure it all out, because it can't be figured out. And when we do try to figure it out, we will reduce it down to something. And this, I guess, gets me to the final point, which is something I'm thinking about a lot, which I can try to talk about more this year, which is obviously the environment and the problems we have in the world are enormously complex. And our tendency when we're up against that kind of challenge and the urgency of it is to reach for some kind of solution which is linear, to engineer something. And believe me, I like technology and I like engineers, but you can't solve a complex ecosystem like a river with a linear solution. You will never fix that problem that way. And so having an epistemology is actually important, and you might be surprised I'm saying this as a Zen teacher, because we're supposed to not know, but how we know actually matters. And Gregory Bateson said, if you don't have an epistemology, you probably have a bad one. So having a worldview that organizes your world is not trivial. If we have a crisis epistemology towards global warming, we pick one thing when it's many things. It's a meta-crisis, a polycrisis with underlying dynamics, and they can't all be seen, and it's very complex. And another kind of epistemology, which I think is probably more useful, although you'll say it's not practical, is what Kyle White, who's an anthropologist, and I think he's an indigenous, he's a Potawatomi tribe, says is kinship epistemology. It's how we started the kinship circle. Kinship epistemology, which is start by looking at the wellness and of communities, of families. Just giving birth to a baby, it's all there. How to take care of the baby. Does the baby, everything is in the baby. Everything is in the relationships, the mother and the baby. Can she raise that baby in a way that's safe, that is the education, the food? So, look at the problem is everything, education, agriculture, it's not one thing. So I'll finish with this, we have monocropping agriculture, which is industrial agriculture, which is terrible, is destroying the environment, we're losing topsoil, we're polluting waters, I could go on and on. I don't want to go on and end on that note. But, okay,
Don't be a Debbie Downer, you're
okay,
going on.
all right. So I just want to leave you with the possibility that what we are struggling with is we have a kind of monoculture of discourse, which means that we actually are not honoring our own complexity with each other. And I want to leave you on that note, that we could begin exploring how to have conversations with each other that aren't binary. They're not right, that aren't this and that, where someone has to win. Someone's right, someone's wrong. Where you question the motives of the person you disagree with. It must be a horrible person. No, can we just begin to have conversations that honor our complexity? And I'll leave it on that note.
Sandy had his hand up.
Who?
Sandy.
Oh, Sandy, did you want to say something? Sorry. You're muted, Sandy.
Oh, sorry. What resonated, thank you for the talk. I really followed and enjoyed very much. What resonated, though, with me was that when I was in high school, a savvy teacher invited a Native American to come talk to the class. And this was at a time when the Army Corps of Engineers wanted to stick a dam across the Willamette Columbia River and dam it up and flood ancestral burial grounds. And the chief said to us, boys and girls, tomorrow your government is going into court and is going to argue that the treaty that my people have with your people is null and void because the treaty said, as long as the rivers shall run and the mountains shall stand. And they're going to say that because the river's not running, they don't have to honor the treaty. And it was a watershed moment for me. And I cut school and went downtown to the district court, federal court, and heard my government say just that in court, that the river's not running, therefore the treaty is void, we can flood those lands. And the chief had said the day before, the problem is, if we disturb the bones of our ancestors by moving them to higher ground, our religion holds that just disturbing the bones releases their spirits into the void where they will wander forever. I'm the chief. Who you think they're going to come looking for? So I decided that's not my government and hasn't been ever since.
Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming this morning. Be well. Take care of each other. Be kind to your neighbors.
Whoever they are.
Appreciate it.
walked after that.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I love you.
So sweet.
It was really good.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. I was wondering your socks.
Are they too better me?
Really comfy.
Yeah, they also have this, you put a sachet packet, and that goes in the microwave, and it's a rolling
But I tried to say this thing. Oh, they're really comfy.
Yeah,
I'm always like, oh, yeah, especially with the shade. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good.
I thought there were many lines, but I was like,
I love it, like, from the other speech that has
Turn off for
Yeah.
I've never felt so sick. I remember
the microphone is on.
With the new microphone, No, I love when we are, when we're recording, I turn the microphone I'm phenomenally sick. Okay, I misheard that.
People that live in that sense
Oh, right,
of
okay.
whatever word you use for it, some sense, like a sun going to Crystal Mountains, kind of a feeling when you're in this kind of electric room, something. In our culture, we find the word for it, but then reduce it to something that's and when you're in the middle, without the word, it's
deactivated by it. I like
it's
that.
amazing that we reduce it.
Not making it
Anyway, help me understand that. Thank you.
Okay.
You're leaving already, Kelly. Oh, bye. All right, well.
Yeah.